sacar. Gracias, Vicky. Buenas noches a todos. Vamos a grabar la conferencia. En honor a vuestra puntualidad, vamos a dar inicio y estaremos admitiendo a todos los demás asistentes. Agradezco no solamente a vosotros la presencia, sino también muy especialmente, y permítanme presentar a Philip Moriski. Philip Moriski es amigo ya después de estar trabajando varios meses en una estrategia muy ambiciosa de poder traer un instrumento muy valioso en términos de utilidad para nuestros pacientes en Latinoamérica, que son las escalas de adherencia y en este caso la escala de Moriski de adherencia a los fármacos. Esto tiene especial interés y por eso con Philip hemos hecho un acercamiento y hemos firmado un acuerdo oficial del Departamento de Circulación Pulmonar de ALAT para poder hacer uso de la escala sin costos para todo lo que corresponde investigaciones en el marco del departamento y en el marco de ALAT. Esto permite entonces dar inicio a una utilización sin ánimo de lucro, con interés académico y qué mejor decirlo que en últimas es para mejorar las ofertas de servicios de atención en términos de acceso a los fármacos y de la utilidad real de los fármacos en los pacientes en Latinoamérica. Sabemos las diferencias que tienen nuestros países y posiblemente esta escala de adherencia, que no es la única, pero es una de las más sólidas, más validadas y más difundidas, por ser un instrumento muy útil para identificar las oportunidades de mejora. Philip, muchas gracias por tu apertura para colaborar con nosotros, con todo el Departamento de Circulación Pulmonar de la ALAT. Gracias por facilitarnos además una plataforma que no es solamente a término individual, sino que tú muy bien lo has dicho, es para todos los miembros del departamento. Y con ello quiero, sin más dilación, darle la palabra a Philip. Philip Moriski es un profesional que ha estado durante más de 30 años trabajando en temas relacionados con la adherencia. Su padre fue uno de los pioneros precisamente de la escala y Philip es un profesional con MBA en Leadership y Management y que es un experto en el tema. Yo creo que este mes, igual que los anteriores, nuestros invitados son de lujo, son invitados que nos honran con su presencia y que el verdadero valor que tienen estas conferencias es escucharos a vosotros y que podáis obtener un beneficio de dedicar este tiempo a la conferencia. Philip, thank you very much for being here with us. Thank you very much for your openness to share with us all your strategies, all your experience, and you are one of the members of the department as honorific charge and one of the leaderships in terms of the strategies that we could eventually develop around the department. And I think that ALAT would be proud of sharing with you this type of expectancies in terms of use this instrument of MMAS for the patients in Latin America. Thank you very much. You are very welcome, and you have all the auditorium to hear your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mauricio, mi amigo. Buenas tardes y buenas noches, estimados doctores y investigadores. Mucho gusto a todo. Thank you for everybody for welcoming me to this consortium. I feel very honored, and I am glad to be a part of this new journey that we all can partake of and participate of together. I do understand Spanish, and I encouraged myself to learn a lot more. So the more I can talk with you guys, I'm hoping to be able to be fluent someday. But for now, I will do my presentation in English, and here it goes. So I'm going to share my screen first. So la adherencia a las terapias en hipertensión pulmonar cómo medirla y cómo mejorarla. I'm going to go over a quick overview, a high-level overview of what I am presenting, this instrument called the MMAS, or as you might know it, the Mirsky Medication Adherence Scale. I'm going to go over how it started, how my father developed it, the many iterations of it, and where I see that we can take this into the future. It's been validated many times, so I'm going to highlight a few articles and publications in very high-tier journals. How do we use it in daily clinical life as well as in real life? So not just clinical studies and clinical trials, but how do we use it as a real-world application? I'm going to go over the advantages of the MMAS and then where we can take it into the future. So I'm going to dedicate about 20 to 25 minutes in this presentation, and there's a 5-minute video, and then we have a little opportunity for questions and comments afterwards. So we're going to first start with my father, Dr. Donald Mirsky. He is the developer of the Mirsky scale. It has his namesake on it. He has a very long career, graduated with a chemistry degree at University of Arizona, moved into public health at Hawaii, and then he finished his master's and doctorate at Johns Hopkins University, which is where I was born. And during this time, 1972 to 77, he was actually also a volunteer in the Peace Corps, which is where he met my mom in the Philippines. So I'm actually half white and half Filipino, and that's a nice little tidbit about me. But as you can see, he has a long history of distinguished visiting chair. He did a lot of work in HIV and tuberculosis in China, Thailand, and the Philippines. And he's gone through a lot. So he has a lot of high presentations. He was a Distinguished Scholar Award. He won like something for APHA, but he's very honored. And he's still alive and he's retired, enjoying traveling. So he couldn't make it to this meeting, but occasionally he will be able to. So at one point in time, I'd love to have him on here and meet all of you guys virtually, and possibly be invited to your country if you could host it someday. That would be great too. Now on to myself. I, like Mauricio said, I have a bachelor's and master's in leadership and management, so I don't necessarily have a health science background, but shadowing my father for over 10 years, I really gained real world experience, and I've read practically every article that's been published. Well, not every article, there's thousands of articles, but I've read so much literature in how this scale has affected every medical condition that I feel like I'm almost nearly a subject matter, not expert, but knowledgeable. So in 2019, I did start traveling a lot, going around the world with my father, and we've done presentations and symposiums and seminars teaching people how to use the MMAS with big CROs and big pharmaceutical companies. So the MMAS is an 8-item questionnaire, and it's heavily used in clinical trials. So dating back to 2013 was when our first, I guess, evidence-based clinical trial with a big company. And up to now, there's over 470 ongoing clinical trials using the MMAS as in clinicaltrials.gov website. And here's the dynamic duo, my father and myself together. This was in England when we did that seminar. So we're going to talk about from the MGL to the MMAS-8. So the MGL is known as the Mirsky, Green, and Levine scale. It was the first publication in 1986 in the Medical Care Journal with my father, Dr. Mirsky, Lawrence Green, and David Levine. It was a very simple, well thought out 4-item questionnaire that could have high validity to understanding how to adhere to your medication. So these are the 3 seminal articles that have the MMAS, the MGL, the MMAS4, and then the MMAS8. We want to understand the evolution of the MMAS, how we got to here. So we all know that the importance of medication adherence, as you could go through these, but the most important thing is that each of us has a loved one. And that's important because that's the importance of medication adherence. Caring for somebody who doesn't have that self-management of taking the medication on their own. That's why we want to push importance of medication adherence, in addition to all these other important facts. So going into the Mirsky-Green-Levine scale, 4 simple questions, very easy to administer. Did you ever forget to take your medicine? Are you careless at times about taking your medicine? When you feel better, do you sometimes stop taking your medicine? And sometimes when you feel the medication, sometimes if you feel worse when you take your medication, do you stop it? So very simple, yes, no, and it could determine with high validity whether that person's at risk for non-adherence to medication. And this was in 1986. So over the years, just like technology, there's always advancements to the scales. The MMAS4 had 2 concerns. We don't call them problems because they're only concerns. Right, hold on, I forgot what I was going to say. No hay problemas, solo soluciones. So the concern number 1, there was a concern that question 2 was, are you careless at times about taking your anti-tuberculosis medication? So we actually replaced that question with, do you ever have problems remembering to take your medication, anti-tuberculosis medication? And concern number 2 was exactly this anti-tuberculosis. We identified the specific medication in order to achieve that higher validity. So when we look at the MMAS4, it actually, in parentheses, you could use it for a whole litany of medical conditions, cardiovascular disease, breast cancer. In fact, we have validated the Mirsky scale in different languages for different health conditions. So here we have it for cáncer de mama, which is breast cancer. So we have this in many different translations and languages, and we validated. This one happened to be validated through Translated. We have another one about Cosentix, and this one was validated by another company that's an ISO 17100. So we have a whole library of different languages, specific Latin American Spanish, and I believe this one was for English to Spanish Argentina. So here's the second article that was published in Elsevier for the MMAS4. And I'll provide these articles for you for your reading enjoyment later on. So moving on to these, the MMAS4, you can see how it's evolved over time. So now the problem with asking a person if they're careless sometimes identifies a person where they might leave their wallet halfway out of their pocket. It's not intentional, but it can be prevented. So instead of saying, are you careless at times, which is what the MGL did, they remade it to say, do you ever have problems remembering to take your medication? And we avoid the social desirability, which is a big bias in self-report medication adherence questionnaires. 95% of the time, if a doctor asks a patient, do you take your medication? Of course, they're going to say yes, because they don't want to get scolded. So we ask the question in reverse. So a no response is actually a high adherent response. The MMAS4 is an ideal screener tool. What do I mean by screener tool? Screener tool is when the patient first comes into the intake and they get their blood pressure and they get their height and weight. They get all these metrics that they could associate their level of adherence to. It's very quick and informal way of asking a patient specific targeted questions that enable that doctor, even before they see the patient, to know if their blood pressure is not in control and their low score on their adherence scale. They know the reason why is because they're not sticking to their regimen. So very quick, very easy to initiate in any clinical setting, and it will eliminate probably a lot of time and a lot of money that could be used elsewhere. So now we move into the MMAS-8. We really want, so you can read this, and we talk about how the addition of 4 extra questions really goes into that why, and it goes into the behaviors and the barriers to adherence. Intentional versus unintentional. We really diagnose and do like a root cause analysis as far as the reasons why that patient's not adherent to their medication, and how do we improve those reasons. If it's economic, socioeconomic, if it's transportation, if it's education. If people don't know why the medication is good for them, they're not going to be inclined to want to take their medication, which is a big barrier. So we want to educate those people more as to the importance of taking their medication on time and as prescribed, because even not taking it on time could cause, adverse effects. If you're supposed to take a medication 3 times a day and you just take it once at the middle of the night, it's not going to provide the same benefits. So here's the MMAS-8. So very similar to the 4-item questionnaires, but we get a little bit more specific. And as this is just a high-level overview, I do have a whole seminar, and we go really in depth as to each question, and I could talk about that later. But if you could see here in question number 2, there's 3 points. We have a time point over the past 2 weeks. We have another question where were there any days when you did not take your high blood pressure medication? Another question here on the number 4, when you travel or leave home, do you sometimes forget to bring along your medications? A lot of times patients, when they go on a cruise, they won't take their medication with them, so they're not going to be able to take their medication as they're prescribed in their whole regimen. Moving on to the following 4 questions. Do you take your high blood pressure yesterday? This is the only question that a yes response is actually high adherent. So all the others are no, and this one is yes. Similar to question 8, it's going to be on a 5-point Likert scale. It's not a no or yes. It's how often do you have difficulty remembering to take all your medications? So the word all really refers to polypharmacy. And that means that more than one medication or more than one medical condition. So you want to include this question. In reality, you should ask the MMAS-8 questionnaire specifically for each condition that patient is having, because sometimes they don't mind taking the blue pill, but they have trouble taking the red pill because it's so big or it feels uncomfortable. You want to separate which medical conditions they have trouble adhering to. So in order to achieve that higher validity, the higher reliability of the scale, be as specific as possible with your questions. So now we come into the Mirsky method. This is a dual-pronged approach. This is a whole concept that I'm starting to introduce to hospitals, clinics, insurance companies, and specialty pharmacies. Especially here in America, specialty pharmacies are really focusing on patient-reported outcome measures as really interventional type awareness. I'm also working with the FDA to get the MMAS approved as a medical device development tool, which will be a huge breakthrough, because once we get that validation from the FDA, other medical device companies will be able to use our scale to validate the efficacy of their own product. So the Mirsky method is a dual-pronged approach, like I said. Ask the 4 questions, and if they are high adherent, then what do? you simply praise them and you encourage them to continue with the regimen. Because if you tell the patient that their blood pressure is in control, that looks everything good, sometimes they might take that and say, oh, I'm healed. I don't need to take my medication anymore, but that's wrong. You want to encourage them to continue. Likewise, if they score low, then you can move on to the 8-item questionnaire, which really goes into that why experience. And you continue as like a drop-down menu. Each question that they respond to, you have another subset of questions that could really kind of tailor their educational counseling to improve their outcomes. So validation and recognition. There's over 250 universities, hospitals, and clinics, and independent practices and pharmacies that I've been working with over the past 4 years in these collaborative type environments. Companies or hospitals and universities from all over around the world. I have contacts in Africa, Asia, even in the Middle East, where barriers to adherence and sanctions are very high, that is very difficult. But the MMAS tool in itself is such a valuable and recognizable tool. My goal is to get it everywhere. You know, it's such a low-cost tool to implement, but the rewards far outweigh any monetary price that you could put on it. So here's a few research highlights that I identified that are specific to pulmonary hypertension that I thought would be very relevant in this. And I'll send you the links to this later, but there's so much literature. All you have to actually do is a Google search and find that this article focused specifically on adherence to pulmonary hypertension with targeted therapies. And it specifically says that they use the Maruski scale to identify high adherence. Which is a good highlight. Let's see, how do I get back to that page? Oops. And there's other links too that I could share the links later. But moving on, I wanted to also highlight this one, high tier journals. So here's an article from the New England Journal of Medicine, where Dr. Castellano, who I've spoke to many times, came up with an article in polypill strategy in secondary cardiovascular prevention. And we used the MMAS specifically in this clinical trial, and the outcome was very well received as well. So we have the MMAS is in high tier journals worldwide. I think the Lancet, Elsevier, and New England Journal of Medicine. So it's validated, it's well known. And what else can you say about that? Here's a small short video in Spanish that I found that I thought you'd enjoy. So I'm going to share it right now.
There is no sound, Philip.
Sorry. Better?
Not yet.
Not yet? Better?
No.
No?
Nada.
No sound?
No, no sound.
Oh, okay. Maybe it doesn't work with the sound. So I'll send you the link to it, but essentially it highlights this this doctor was using the Maruski scale, and she had a lot of good things to say about it.
Yes, I have seen this video, and it's really important because it is a real life experience, huh?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why I wanted to include it. So
yeah.
you guys could look at it later. And I thought that was a good thing to share. So now we talk about the collaboration that we're going to participate in, and Mauricio could help me out with this, but it outlines very, very high level reasons why this is such a good opportunity, and to be as transparent as possible with all our stakeholders, which are all of you guys. That my goal for this is to get the Mariski scale out there to every clinic, every research, every academic opportunity. I want medication adherence to be a measurable outcome, not only in clinical studies and clinical trials, but in real world scenarios. I want people to really, embrace it and to further develop it, which is what I'm doing as well. So now we have an osteoporosis specific medication adherence scale. We have a pediatric specific medication adherence scale where we could administer it to a caretaker or a guardian. And that way we could really identify the pediatric setting of how medication adherence works. Also to refine the scale to be more fluid. I'm sure there's so many opportunities to build up on what we have now. I mean, right now we have so much work with clinical trials. We have a lot of work with pharmacies and pharmaceutical companies. They're embracing this. We really want to get it to other parts of the world. So with your help, I think that's very achievable. My ultimate goal, there's over 900 languages, and I'm sure there's thousands of languages, but I would like to have this translated and validated in any language, every language in the world, but a couple hundred wouldn't be bad. So where do we go from here? There are many opportunities that I see this collaboration can do. Web-based training, I think an opportunity exists that we can provide training to members and non-members of these associations. There's so many skill sets that the Mariski scale could be set into, like shared decision-making, collaborative care management, even medication therapy management. The opportunities to just use the scale in a variety of settings is endless, and we can provide a training so that people know how to use the algorithm, how to really assess the patient, because just by going through the scale, you get a raw number, but what do you do with that number afterwards? How do you follow that patient over time and show improvement, show the KPIs so that hospitals can get their stars or their magnet status, or just, overall improvement. Insurance companies gravitate to this because just like if you check a box that says, no, you don't smoke, or yes, you run 2 miles a day, if you measure high on your adherence level, then obviously that's an incentive for them to provide you discounts on your insurance. And this is a validated scale that could achieve those numbers. So that was it for my presentation. I am on LinkedIn, so if you do utilize LinkedIn, I am very vocal, and I do present daily. So I encourage you to look at that. That's it. I want to hand the microphone back to Mauricio and continue to work with you guys.
Thank you very much, Philip. Thank you very much. Really interesting, and thank you very much for your time and precision in the concepts. Voy a hacer algunos comentarios. El primero es que se abre desde el inicio, ya lo dijimos, podéis hacer preguntas. Tenéis los micrófonos disponibles para preguntar. Lo podéis hacer en castellano, lo podéis hacer en inglés. Sé que la mayoría o todos entendéis el inglés, solo porque estamos grabando la conferencia voy a hacer algunos comentarios en castellano y los traduciré para mejorar, obviamente, la discusión con Philip. ¿Alguien tiene algún comentario que hacer o alguna pregunta específica en este momento? Bueno, mientras os decidís, si es que así es el caso, Philip, some questions that I have been identifying during your presentations. La primera pregunta es respecto a que es un instrumento para evaluar la adherencia a los medicamentos, pero esto solamente es válido para medicamentos vía oral o también para medicamentos parenterales. Philip, you have presented the MMAS scale in order to evaluate adherence in medication that are taken per oral daily or a weekly basis. But we have patients with parenteral medications. Is this useful also for medication that are prescribed subcutaneously or intravenous in adults or in children?
Absolutely, yes. We have oral medical conditions and we have insulin medical conditions. And there I can provide you with validated articles that go into a lot of different ways to ingest the medication. So even eye drops, there have been studies that validated medication adherence with eye drop therapy.
Excellent. You have, I just want to emphasize some strikingly important points. Quiero solamente resaltar algunos aspectos que son muy importantes. The scale is a characterization of the problem, the concerns, or the scale is also able to be used as a strategy to detect opportunities of improvement or solutions, or is it just a characterization of the problem? Estoy preguntando si la escala solamente es una caracterización de las dificultades o de los problemas, o si nos permite identificar u ofrecer alguna solución al propio problema. Philip.
So that's a very great question. The scale was first developed as a clinical study scale, clinical trial scale, but now with the two-pronged approach that I discussed, that is real world evidence. That's real data that's being harvested. And now what do we do with it? We improve those patients' outcomes by the continuous education and counseling. So we give that patient the questionnaire at time point A, and throughout the different time points, we encourage them and we meet with them and we develop that relationship. So shared decision-making or collaborative care. We use the Mirsky scale in those specific environments. And every time you remeasure, maybe 6 months or 9 months down the line, and you show improvement, that's what the improvement is identifying. On the alternative side, if they score low, even if they score really low, then you want to look at other reasons why. Perhaps they are depressed or they're suicidal. Then there's other scales that you could really use in conjunction with the Mirsky scale to really identify that patient's behavior.
Absolutely relevant for the real life strategies of treating these patients. You mentioned that the scale is able to detect not only the intentional, but also the non-intentional mistakes or errors in the adherence for the medication. Usted comentó que la escala no solamente puede detectar errores intencionados, sino no intencionados al tomar el medicamento. Is that true?
So yes, so in especially the 8-item questionnaire, it's actually divided almost equally for non-intentional questions and for intentional questions. So if I could bring up my screen just really quickly,
Yeah.
I want to definitely share with you that concept. And it's a very good question that you asked, and I wanted to show you what what the psychometric properties really means, because the word psychometric properties, some people don't really understand what the psychometric properties means, but it really goes into identifying with high validity, high reliability, what these what the intentional and unintentional really mean. So let's just scroll back to the questionnaire. And I'll just give you a really brief sample because I have a whole study on this. But question number 3, have you ever cut back or stopped taking your medication? So that's one question, without telling your doctor. And that's another question, because you felt worse when you took it. So that's actually an intentional non-adherent answer if you were to ask that, because you're knowingly not taking your medication. On the other side, on the alternative side, do you sometimes forget to take your medication? Forgetting is different than not intentionally taking it. So this is an unintentional response. So through our matrix, which we have, and each question is answered, then you could really break it down to see which answer they responded in the intentional versus the unintentional. And then we go into the 5 barriers to adherence, where there's so many dimensions as to the why they're not taking it. Whether, like I said, it's the transportation costs or even the education. And we have a whole matrix as to how to, really pinpoint the reasons why. And it's actually the only scale that can do that with such high validity. There's the Mars scale, there's other medication adherence questionnaires, but this is the only one that really breaks down the intentional non-adherence versus unintentional non-adherence. One more identification of questions. Taking medication every day is a real inconvenience for some people. Do you ever feel hassled about sticking to your blood pressure treatment plan or medication? So this is the word hassled is the real word that you're looking for, because that's indicating intentional non-adherence. Because if you feel hassled or you feel bothered and you don't want to take your medication, then that's knowingly not taking your medication.
Surely, y esto se refleja obviamente en que la intervención o la mejora es diferente. This reflects into the different strategy to improve the adherence, because you are identifying the actual psychological basis of the non-adherence behavior. Realmente importante. Otra de las cosas que mencionaste fue las polipastillas o las polypills que combinan medicaciones. En hipertensión pulmonar aún no las tenemos. Probablemente vayan a estar. Hay 2 ensayos clínicos evaluando unas polypills y ya lo comentaste, pero quisiera que enfatizaras si las polypills con vuestra escala han demostrado que facilitan de forma relevante la adherencia. Do you believe that polypills really improve the adherence possibility for patients in some other scenario, like systemic hypertension or diabetes or whatever?
Yes, that's a great question. So in addition to the New England Journal of Medicine that Dr. Castellano did, there was another recent article, and I'd love to pull that up down the line, and I could share it through WhatsApp. It went into polypill strategy, that's another improvement in medication adherence scenarios. So using polypills, using the Mirsky scale in conjunction with each other is a 2-pronged approach as well, and really emphasizes the need to come up with novel ideas to improve, to put a big focus on intentional and unintentional adherence.
Excellent. Os vuelvo a invitar si queréis hacer algún comentario. Creo que voy a pasar a la última parte de mis preguntas, Philip, que son las prácticas. Y las prácticas tienen que ver con la traducción al castellano. La traducción implica una validación de que la traducción es realmente precisa. Traducción, retrotraducción y validación. Este aspecto está hecho para el castellano. La mayoría de los países latinoamericanos hablamos castellano como lengua materna. Have you evaluated the translation, the retro translation, the validity of the questionnaires in Castellano, in Spanish?
When in Castellano is his, which one is that?
It's Spanish, it's Spanish.
Oh, yes. Yes. So they have a whole process with forward and backward translation. And I believe it's actually in the article itself, how they did it. And it's really, identifying each word and making sure that what they're asking for is what the intention of asking the question is. So yes, it has been harmonized and localized for the specific medication itself.
Great. And my last question, mi última pregunta. This is a psychometric evaluation of adherence for patients or in the patients. From a practical point of view, if one of my colleagues wants to develop some research, how they could be through the Department of Pulmonary Circulation of ALAT or independently or directly, how they can reach for the expertise in order to use the questionnaire to quantify the responses and to translate the responses into a practical document. Le he preguntado si desde el punto de vista práctico, como es una escala psicométrica que necesita ser cuantificada e interpretada, ¿cómo hacemos vosotros o yo para poner en práctica ese cuestionario en una investigación que querramos hacer a través del Departamento de Circulación Pulmonar? Philip, what is the step-by-step protocol that we should use?
So I believe that's a question that you and I could answer collaboratively. The whole reason for me joining the ALAT and the Hyper Redco is to bring this more awareness. And the whole process would be defined eventually, but for now, I think just working with Mauricio and myself, we can come up with a step-by-step. So this is very premature in our introduction, but we definitely encourage the research and the opportunities to get funding, to get opportunities to work with the many pharmaceutical companies that I already have established relationships with. This is a global product that sees no barriers, and my whole goal is to get it as used as possible. I don't want to prohibit its use in the scientific community at all.
Great, thank you, Philip. Creo, si me permites, Philip, please, may I to summarize some of the practical points of our agreement? I think that it is really relevant for my colleagues. El acuerdo que hemos hecho con Philip Moriski y todo el grupo que trabaja con la escala es que vosotros y ninguno que esté ligado a una investigación del Departamento de Circulación Pulmonar a través de ALAT tiene que pagar absolutamente nada. Esto es una estrategia altruista en el sentido que está ligado a la academia, pero obviamente es un cuestionario que tiene costos, pero el acuerdo que tenemos a la fecha es que a través del departamento, las investigaciones que hagamos y que apliquemos el cuestionario para evaluar adherencia en Latinoamérica no va a tener costo, con lo cual públicamente yo quiero agradecer a Philip y todo su grupo por hacer esa apertura. El paso a paso de cómo utilizar el cuestionario es lo que hemos desarrollado. Hemos desarrollado una propuesta de tal manera que hay que recibir la propuesta de en qué investigación se va a hacer, se evalúa y se solicita la aprobación a Moriski y su grupo, y entonces podemos utilizar la escala, que es una escala psicométrica, que para poderla interpretar, obviamente, pues es investigación cualitativa y no es solamente un sí y un no. Entonces, con esto yo termino mi intervención. Creo que lo más importante, y veo que hay muchos colegas que además veo a varios que no son necesariamente neumólogos, y entre ellas está inclusive personal de enfermería y terapeutas, que creo que es muy importante que se hayan vinculado a la conferencia y la podrán difundir a través del chat. La vamos a difundir para que la podáis tener, pero os doy la palabra por si tenéis algunas preguntas. Entonces, creo que es un avance muy importante. Creo que hemos hecho múltiples reuniones buscando el acuerdo, que nuestra compliance esté exquisitamente protegida, que los pacientes sean los beneficiados y que obviamente sea un producto independiente de quién sea el director, que en este caso soy yo, hasta este año del departamento, sino que el departamento de circulación pulmonar continúe contando con esta estrategia para hacer investigación. Entonces, Philip, muchísimas gracias por esa apertura. Sé que las preguntas adicionales que puedan haber o las que puedan haber ahora, te las podremos hacer llegar eh, por el mismo WhatsApp o por correo, que creo que es una de las ventajas que tenemos y es la cercanía y la apertura que Philip ha hecho con todos nosotros desde hace ya varios meses. Os doy la palabra. ¿Tenéis algún comentario, alguna pregunta, algo adicional que comentar a nuestro invitado? Bueno, Philip, creo que no hay comentarios o preguntas. Seguramente nos las harán llegar después. Philip, thank you very much for your presentation. With this presentation, we launch the strategy for all the different members of the pulmonary circulation department of ALAT. You are now a member of the department. I think that we are really honored to share with you and all your team this type of expectancies in terms of growth and common success, looking for the um, points of concerns and more importantly, the solutions that we can offer for our patients in Latin America. Thank you very much. Philip está en California. You are in California, so you are 2 hours of difference, but thank you very much. Thank you very much for your effort to be sharing with all of us your expertise and to launch this type of strategy formally now with all the members that have been able to connect tonight, but we can share all the record presentation via the WhatsApp chat. I give you the microphone in order to close your presentation if there are no other questions, but really thank you. And we are really proud to share with you this presentation tonight.
Thank you, Mauricio. I as well feel honored, and I hope this really blossoms into a very fruitful and fruit-bearing relationship. And I hope I can get to know each and every one of the associates someday. Feel free to reach out to me directly or collaboratively, and I'm always here to answer any questions that you have. And I'm just excited to be a part of this big organization, because it's definitely a global scale, and it's a global platform that I could actually sit on. So thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And hopefully we can meet you in Santiago de Chile in our Congress. So we hopefully can share some wine and some good food in Santiago. Ok, muchas gracias a todos y a todas por haber estado presentes. Ha sido un honor compartir con ustedes. Tienen ustedes un buen producto, tienen una oferta de un instrumento que debemos utilizar, y ahora entonces la responsabilidad está en manos de cada uno. Cualquier estrategia y cualquier iniciativa es bienvenida, y obviamente tocaremos vuestras puertas con las ideas que hemos podido consolidar a través del departamento y en compañía del doctor Montes. Guillermo, no sé si estás en línea, no logro ver todo, pero si quieres, Guillermo, ¿estás ahí? Muchas
Hola,
gracias, Guillo. Ya te veo. Muchas gracias y os voy a dejar con el doctor Guillermo Montes, vicedirector del departamento y es nuestro próximo director que se posesionará en el Congreso. Y el próximo mes que haremos la siguiente reunión con el doctor Montes presentaremos algunas de las muy originales ideas que él está desarrollando para continuar esta labor de hacer crecer el departamento y de ofrecer productos relevantes. Guillo, muchas gracias y tienes la palabra para clausurar el evento.
gracias Mauricio y gracias a todos por estar presentes en esta reunión. No se olviden, nuestro Congreso de ALAT 2024 en Santiago de Chile, del 10 al 13 de julio. Lo esperamos con los brazos abiertos para disfrutar un buen vino chileno. Mauricio, muchas gracias a todos. Buenas noches.
Buenas noches, gracias Guillo, un abrazo especial. Bye, Philip. Thank you very much.